The boy's voice cracked the air. "Father." Elias Ward's hand froze on the reins. Why would an Apache orphan call him that? And what secret could tie their lives before they had even met? For a heartbeat, Elias couldn't move. The wind whipped grit against his face, the crowd at the trading post waiting for him to speak. The girl clung tighter to the boy's arm. "What did you say?" Elias's voice was barely louder than the wind. "Oh, you're my father." No tremor, no hesitation, just a truth the boy seemed sure of. Someone in the crowd laughed, sharp and ugly. Another muttered something about Apache lies. Elias ignored them, swung himself into the saddle, and jerked his chin toward the mule. "Get on, both of you." The boy hesitated only long enough to lift his sister up, then climbed behind Elias. The crowd kept staring. Elias kept riding. The street gave way to open land, sagebrush bent by the winter gusts. The boy's grip on his sister never loosened. The girl, Nita, kept peeking around him to watch Elias's face. "I don't know your story," Elias said, eyes on the trail. "But I'll give you work, food, and a roof, that's it," the boy answered without looking away from the horizon. "It's not the first time you've helped us." Elias frowned but didn't ask. Not yet. The sky was turning copper, the ranch house still an hour away. His horse's breath came in slow clouds. At the ridge, the boy finally spoke again. "You left something in the canyon years ago." "What?" "A coat, with a pocket torn here." Taza tapped his own shirt where the fabric had been patched. Elias felt a cold deeper than the wind settle in his chest. Before he could answer, the mare's ears flicked back. Somewhere behind them, a single hoof crunched on frost, then stopped. The sound came again, one hoof on frozen ground, then stillness. Elias didn't look back. "Keep your hands on the saddle horn," he said. "Both of you." Taza shifted behind him. "He's been there since town." "You saw?" "Felt it." They cut across low scrub, keeping the ridgeline to their left. The sun slid lower, turning the dust to copper. Nita wrapped her fingers inside Elias's coat where the wool was warmer. "You cold, a little one?" Elias asked. She nodded. Taza guided her hands tighter. "Hold fast. 10 minutes." They reached a dry wash and dropped in, letting the bank swallow their silhouettes. Elias dismounted, led the horse and mule on foot, and listened. The hoof didn't move. Wind rattled prickly pear spines. A raven croaked once and sailed off toward the south pasture. "Why would he follow?" Elias asked. Taza didn't answer. His eyes scanned the lip of the wash. "You have water." "Up ahead." They climbed out where mesquite grew thicker. Elias swung back into the saddle and pushed the pace until the fence line rose in the distance. A coyote called from the far arroyo. The answering silence felt too careful. At the gate he stopped, opened it, waved the mule through, and shut it again. Whoever shadowed them would have to dismount here or risk his horse breaking a leg in the wire. Small advantage. Not enough. Inside the yard, Elias didn't lead them straight to the house. He cut to the barn first. "Horses in," he said. "Quiet." They worked fast. Nita carried the coil of lead line with 2 hands like it might break. Taza loosened girths and rolled blankets with practiced care. Elias pitched hay, poured grain, and slid the stall bolts. When all the mouths were busy, he pointed to the tack room. "In," he said. The tack room smelled of oil and pine. Saddles hung in a neat row. A wooden trunk sat under the low window. Elias knelt, lifted the lid, and pulled a folded coat free, the old one. Brown canvas worn soft. The pocket on the left side had a ragged tear. Taza drew the cloth scrap from his shirt. He laid it on the tear. The edges matched like 2 halves of a cut leaf. Nita's breath caught. "See?" Elias stared. In his mind, a much younger man left hardtack and jerky near a creek, shrugged out of this very coat, set it where 2 small figures hid behind rocks, and rode away fast before soldiers returned to hunt anyone who looked like he'd helped. He had told no one. "How did you get this scrap?" Elias asked. "Our mother kept it," Taza said. "Said the man with the torn coat was the only one who didn't treat us like a warning. What did she tell you about your father?" Taza's gaze didn't flinch. "She said he was a man who didn't run from trouble when it was small." Nita squeezed her eyes shut, as if bracing for the next part. Before Elias could speak, a board creaked outside the barn, slow, testing weight. Not the wind. Elias put a finger to his lips. He eased the coat back into the trunk, shut the lid without a sound, and crossed to the wall. The Winchester stood in a corner rack. He checked the chamber, then looked to Taza. "Stay with your sister," he whispered. Taza shook his head once. "Show me where." Elias studied him. The boy was all bones and watchfulness, but his eyes were steady. He handed him a short-handled hay fork instead. "Only if he comes through the door." The creak didn't repeat. A magpie chattered and fell silent. Elias slid out of the tack room, crossed the barn's shadowed aisle, and put his shoulder to a gap in the boards. Through it, he could see part of the yard and the house porch. Nothing moved. He waited, counted to 30. Then he caught it, a horse's breath hanging in the chill just to the far side of the woodpile. Whoever he was, he knew how to ride quiet. Elias stepped out slow, rifle down, but ready. "You're on private land." A man eased his horse forward into view. Mid-40s, dust-coated coat, hat pulled low. He kept both hands visible. No badge, no army blue. The horse wore a saddle with a stitched seat someone had cared for. "Afternoon," the man said. "Name's Calder." "What do you want, Mr. Calder?" Calder looked past Elias toward the barn. "Town said you took 2 Indian young'uns. I work for families out by San Miguel who've had trouble lately. Runaways, theft, fences cut. You think 2 children cut fences? I think trouble collects where it's fed." The man tipped his chin. "You aim to feed trouble? You got a warrant?" "Don't need one to ask questions." "You're done asking on my yard," Elias said. "Ride on?" Calder smiled without warmth. "You buy them." "I gave them a home." "That's not what I asked." Elias lifted the rifle an inch. "Ride on." Calder's eyes cooled. He touched the brim of his hat, turned his horse as if to leave, then glanced at the fence line. "Storm coming," he said. "Hard to keep roofs on when wind gets like this." He rode out slow, like a man who wanted his back seen. At the gate, he stopped and looked long at the wire before moving on. Elias waited until Calder was a speck, then gone. He stood still another 10 seconds. Only then did he lower the rifle. In the tack room, Nita's shoulders shook with quiet, frustrated breaths. Taza watched Elias for a cue. "He'll be back," Taza said. "I know," Elias answered. "That's why we do this right." "What is right?" Nita whispered. Elias crouched to her height. "Right is food, warmth, and you not looking over your shoulder all day. Right is papers that say you live here because you choose to, not because someone traded you like rope." Nita blinked. "Papers? Church records. County registry. It's not everything, but it starts a path folk can't kick out from under you." Taza nodded once. "And men like Calder?" "Men like Calder prefer no paper," Elias said. "Words blow away. Ink doesn't." He stood. "Eat first. Then we ride for the mission before dark." They moved to the house. Elias set the pot on the table and ladled stew. Nita's hands steadied on the spoon. Taza ate slower, eyes on the window. "You said the canyon," Elias said, breaking his own rule and asking while their mouths were full, because silence had kept too many secrets already. "What else did your mother say?" Taza wiped his bowl with bread, buying himself a second. "She said the man with the torn coat came back once. He left cornmeal and a small wooden horse. He didn't wait to be thanked." Elias looked to the shelf by the door, where a whittled horse sat beneath a lantern. The tail had been carved too thin and snapped short years ago. He felt the room tilt, just a little. Nita followed his gaze. "Is that ours?" "It was never mine alone," Elias said. "Finish the stew." Wind pressed against the single-paned glass. Something loose rattled on the porch. Elias stood, took 2 blankets from a chest, and wrapped each child, tucking corners the way his wife had once done with quilts on winter nights. He tried not to remember too long. He buckled on his gun belt and slung the rifle. "Taza, you ride the mule with Nita. Keep low on the far side of the trees when we leave the yard. If you see dust on the north road, you cut to the creek bed and wait for my whistle." "What whistle?" Elias put 2 fingers to his tongue and sent a sharp, rising call cutting through the room. Nita jumped, then smiled despite herself. Like a hawk, she said. Exactly. They stepped onto the porch. The sky had sunk to iron. Elias locked the door, checked the yard, and led them toward the barn. He kept his body between the children and the open field. At the barn, he threw open the stall. The mare pricked her ears. The mule shook his head and stamped. Elias saddled quick, cinches firm, motions spare. Taza swung up first, then pulled Nita behind him and looped an arm around her waist. They moved out at a trot, cutting behind the windbreak, past the empty chicken run, and into the cottonwoods that lined the dry creek. Elias listened for the telltale echo of another set of hooves. Nothing, only wind and the small clicks of tack. Half a mile down, the creek bed widened. Elias signaled left toward the old wagon track that led to the mission. He tasted iron in the air and didn't like it. The mission bell sometimes carried on this wind, but not tonight. "Stay close," he said. "Eyes on the ground for fresh prints." Taza pointed. There. In the dust, a single horseshoe mark with a chipped toe caught the light. Fresh, headed the same way they were going. Elias dismounted, knelt, and pressed 2 fingers to the edge. The crumble was still damp with frost melt. He looked up the track where the cottonwoods thinned, and the adobe wall of the mission would usually show like a pale line. No wall, no bell, no lamplight. Only the outline of a rider, waiting motionless where the road narrowed to 1 horse wide. Elias stopped mid-step, hand tightening on the mare's reins. The figure ahead hadn't moved an inch, horse standing square, head slightly lowered like it was bred for patience. "Stay in the creek bed," Elias said over his shoulder. Taza's eyes flicked to the rider, then back to Elias. "Same horse." "Could be." The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of tobacco. Whoever it was, they'd been here long enough to light up. Elias guided the mare a few paces forward, slow and deliberate. His boots sank in the dust with soft crunches, each one measuring the space between them and the stranger. At 20 yards, the rider spoke. "Evening?" The voice was calm, almost polite. "Long way to take kids for a Sunday ride?" "They've got business at the mission," Elias replied. "And you're standing in the road." The man's face stayed shadowed under the brim of his hat. "Road's free to all, last I checked." Elias's jaw tightened. "Step aside." The rider exhaled smoke, flicked the cigarette into the dirt. "You buy them, or just take pity." "Why's that matter to you?" "Because pity wears off. Paper lasts longer." Elias took another step. The man didn't flinch, but his horse's ears flicked back. "Move." "I hear you were in the canyon once," the rider said. Elias froze. The mare tossed her head, feeling the tension in the reins. "What canyon?" Elias asked, voice even. "Only one where a white man left his coat with a torn pocket and didn't wait for thanks." The man tilted his head. "Small world, ain't it?" Elias's grip on the reins eased, just enough to keep from showing strain. "You have a name. Call me Crowder." He smiled without showing teeth. "And I'm just here to say the folks in San Miguel don't like surprises. Those 2 are a surprise." "They're children," Elias said flatly. "They're Apaches," Crowder corrected. "And there's men up north who'd pay for the right to have them back in certain camps. You keep them, you inherit their enemies." Taza shifted in the saddle behind. "We've had worse enemies." Elias didn't glance back. "Not another word," he told him quietly. Crowder's smile widened a fraction. "Brave boy. Brave gets you buried quicker in these parts." "You done talking?" Elias asked. "Not yet." Crowder leaned forward in the saddle. "I'll give you 3 days. Take them somewhere else. Somewhere they're someone else's problem. Or when I come back, it'll be with friends." Elias studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. Not as surrender, but as dismissal. 3 days, he said. "Then you stay off my land." Crowder touched his hat and turned his horse, riding north at an unhurried walk. Elias waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded before stepping back to the creek bed. "We keep riding," he said. Nita's voice trembled. "Why does he want us gone?" Elias mounted up. "Because some men can't tell the difference between a threat and their own fear." They rode on toward the mission. The adobe wall appeared at last, pale against the darkening sky. But the gate stood open, swinging slightly in the wind. No lanterns burned inside. Elias dismounted first, scanning the yard. The smell of smoke lingered here too, but not from cooking fires. Ashes lay scattered near the well, dark and cold. Taza slid down with Nita. "Where is everyone?" Elias stepped inside, rifle in hand. Benches were overturned in the chapel. A hymnal lay open in the aisle, pages damp from where snowmelt had blown in. "Gone," Elias said quietly. "And not because they wanted to be." Nita's hand found his. "Will they come back?" He shook his head. "Not tonight." They walked the length of the chapel, boots echoing. Behind the altar, a small storage room stood open. Inside, sacks of flour were slashed open, grain spilled across the floor. Barrels lay on their sides, empty. Taza bent to pick up a wooden cross, its base cracked. "Crowder, or someone like him," Elias said. "Either way, he wanted us to see this." They returned to the yard. The light was almost gone, the first stars sharp in the cold sky. Elias turned toward the east gate. "We're riding home the long way. Keep to the trees." They moved out at a trot, the mare's breath clouding in the cold. Elias kept glancing behind, catching only the shifting shadows of mesquite, but the feeling of eyes on them never left. At the first bend in the trail, Taza leaned forward. "Why not just leave?" "Because this is our land," Elias said. "Yours now too, if you want it." Nita's voice was small. "Even if they don't." "Especially if they don't," Elias answered. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faint, rhythmic creak of leather from somewhere behind. Whoever was out there wasn't done, and by the time they reached the ridge above the ranch, Elias knew the 3 days Crowder had promised were already gone. They reached the ridge as the last light died. The ranch below was a rectangle of darker shadow. No lamp burned in the window, no glow from the stove. Elias reined in. "Dismount," he said. "We walk the last 100 yards." Taza slid down with Nita. "Because of him. Because of whoever he brings," Elias said. They led the animals through the cottonwoods. Twigs snapped under their boots. The air tasted of cold iron and old smoke. At the fence, Elias stopped and crouched. The top wire sagged. The twist had been cut and retied badly. "He came here," Taza whispered. "Or sent someone," Elias said. "Keep low." They slipped along the fence line to the back of the barn. Elias put a hand to the wood. The boards were cool, no heat, no fire. He tried the side door and eased it open. The mare nickered once, soft and relieved. The mule flapped his lips like he was scolding someone late to supper. "Good," Elias murmured. "Quiet helps." He led the animals in, shut the door, and slid the bolt. Then he crossed to the house, keeping to the shadows. A nail gleamed on the porch post with something pinned under it. "Wait here," he told the children. He stepped up, pulled the paper free and read by the thin light leaking from the rising moon. "You were warned. 3 days is a courtesy, not a law. Tomorrow night. Choose them or you." No signature. Just a small X burned into the corner of the page. Elias folded it into his pocket and unlocked the door. The room smelled like banked ashes and dry bread. No one had broken the latch. He set a match to the lamp and turned the wick low, just enough to paint the room in amber. Nita's shoulders dropped a fraction at the light. Taza stood by the window, eyes on the yard. "Eat fast," Elias said. "Then we set the house the way I want it." They chewed cold bread and hard cheese in 3 minutes. Elias pulled a crate from under the bed and set it on the table. Inside lay a few coils of wire, 2 lanterns, a hammer, a tin of nails, and a small bundle wrapped in oiled cloth. He unrolled it and checked the spare cylinders for his pistol. Taza watched, saying nothing. "You two will sleep in the root cellar," Elias said. "If something goes wrong, you take the rear hatch and follow the creek to the cottonwoods. You wait there for my whistle." Nita swallowed. "Alone?" "Together," Elias said. "Always together." He showed them the cellar door behind the stove, lifted it, and let them climb down the short ladder. He set a lantern on the last step and arranged sacks of beans as a quick barricade they could push aside from inside. "Listen for boots on boards," he said. "If you hear that, you go. If you hear glass break, you go. If I shout river, you go." Nita nodded too fast. Taza placed a hand on her shoulder and pressed once. She steadied. Back upstairs, Elias blew the lamp out and moved in the dark, counting steps he knew by heart. He opened the back door and slipped to the barn. In the tack room, he took the coil of wire and the tin of nails. He strung a line ankle high across the path from the privy to the porch, another line near the woodpile, a third at the corner where a man hugging the wall would pass in shadow. He set one lantern on the kitchen floor and another on the porch, both unlit. A thrown match would give him 2 points of glare to look beyond. He poured a thin line of flour inside the door, just enough to catch a boot print if anyone stepped through. The moon lifted. The yard sharpened into edges. Elias stood in the doorway and let the cold work its way into him, until even his worry cooled. Taza's whisper floated up through the floorboards. "You should sleep an hour." "I will," Elias said, though he would not. "Tell me if anything creaks." Time stretched. The stove ticked as metal cooled. Somewhere out by the windbreak, an owl called once and went quiet. Elias was about to step to the porch when a faint scrape came from the far side of the barn. Not a footfall. Leather? Then a breath. He moved to the window and looked through the gap in the curtain, a shape separated from the dark. Then another. 3 men. No torches. No talk. Crowder's kind. Elias moved to the cellar door. He lifted it, crouched, and spoke soft. "River." Nita's breath hitched. Taza answered, "Steady. We're moving." Elias heard the soft drag of sacks. A hinge rasped below, then the whisper of their feet on packed dirt. He let the door fall and crossed as they slipped out the rear hatch. The first man found the wire near the woodpile. He cursed under his breath and stumbled. The second man reached to steady him. The third hissed them still. Elias waited until they were 2 steps from the porch. He struck a match, lit the porch lantern, and set it on the top stair. Light flared and threw long shadows across the yard. "Gentlemen," Elias said, rifle in the crook of his arm, "you're trespassing." No one answered. The third man slid to the side, testing the edge of the light. He had a small axe in his hand, not for wood. "Crowder send you?" Elias asked. A different voice answered from the dark, farther left. "He sent me to look," the voice said. "Name's Calder." Elias felt the corner of his mouth tighten. Calder in the yard, Crowder on the road. Same saddle stitch, same tobacco. 2 names for one trade. "Tell your employer the children aren't leaving," Elias said. "You can save yourself a cold ride by turning around now." "Not how it works," Calder said. "You got paper for them yet?" "By tomorrow," Elias said. "Mission was stripped clean. I'll find the priest in Santa Fe if I have to." "You won't get that far," Calder said. The axeman edged forward. Elias lifted the rifle a hair. The man froze. "You're counting bullets," Calder said. "I'm counting men. Let's talk fair. You give me the boy. The girl goes to a work train headed east. You keep your roof and your skin." Elias stepped down 1 stair. "I'd burn this roof myself before I hand them to you." Calder sighed, a sound of thin patience. "You were warned." A sudden clatter burst from the far side of the yard. Taza's whistle knifed the night, sharp and rising. The men flinched toward the sound. Elias snapped the rifle to his shoulder and fired into the dirt between them, bright dust jumping. The men jumped back on reflex, tangling in the second wire. One fell hard and swore. Elias worked the lever. "Next one isn't a warning." Calder didn't move. His horse stamped once in the dark, unseen but close. "You won't shoot a man with a badge," he said. "You don't wear one," Elias replied. "Tonight I don't need it." A new sound rolled in then, low and wrong. It wasn't wind. It wasn't hooves. It was the slow crackle of something catching where it shouldn't. Elias smelled it before he saw it. Pitch. Someone had slipped around to the back of the barn. "Fire!" Taza shouted from the trees. "Behind!" Elias spun toward the barn. Flame licked up a corner post, greedy and bright. The mule brayed, panicked. The mare kicked the stall and struck wood like a drum. Calder laughed once in the dark. "Choose," he said. "Them or the barn." Elias ran for the pump, dropped the rifle on the porch, and grabbed the bucket. Water slammed into the pail like stones. He threw the first load onto the post. Steam roared. The fire hissed, then flared higher, fed by pitch someone had daubed thick. He pumped again, chest heaving. Shadows moved at the edge of the yard, men watching with still, patient interest. They didn't need to rush him. The fire would do their work. "Get the animals out," he shouted toward the trees. "Cut the stall ropes and slap them hard." "I can help you," Taza called. "For you help them," Elias answered. "Now." He threw another bucket, then another. The flames leaned back, then reached forward again with a hungry sound. Sparks popped and leapt toward the dry shingles of the house. Elias felt heat kiss his face and smelled hair singe along his temple. A shot cracked from the dark and shattered the porch lantern. The yard fell back into shadow. Elias ducked on instinct. Glass rained in a bright hiss. Calder's voice came soft and close. Too close. "Time's up!" Something heavy moved in the dark to Elias's right, bootsteps closing fast on the pump. He swung the bucket on reflex and caught a shape in the ribs. The man grunted and folded, dropping a second pitch pot that burst and splashed the pump platform in a dark, shining sheet. The flames licked higher, found the new fuel, and took it with a roar. Heat washed across the yard in a single, brutal wave. Elias staggered back, eyes watering, and felt for the door. His hand found wood. He pulled himself onto the porch, half blind, and reached for the rifle he'd left. His hand closed on empty boards. Elias blinked hard, forcing the sting from his eyes. The rifle was gone. The boards were bare where it had rested. He scanned the yard through the haze, shadows flickering between the barn and the house, the smell of pitch thick in his throat. A figure stood at the edge of the porch, the rifle slung low in his hands. Calder. The glow from the barn's fire caught the faint curl of his smile. "Looking for this?" he asked. Elias's fingers flexed at his sides. "That's theft." "That's leverage," Calder said, stepping up onto the first porch stair. The boards groaned under his weight. "Now you're just a man without teeth." Behind Calder, the barn roof groaned and spat sparks. The animals' frantic cries split the air, hooves striking, the mule's bray turning ragged. "You'll kill them if you don't let me through," Elias said. "That's the point," Calder replied evenly. From the tree line, Taza's voice rang out, sharp and furious. "Leave him alone!" Calder's head turned toward the sound, the smallest flinch. Enough. Elias lunged forward, catching Calder's wrist with both hands and wrenching it down. The rifle's barrel slammed into the porch rail. Wood splintered. Calder grunted, twisting, but Elias had leverage now. He shoved the man sideways, using the porch post as a pivot. Calder's boot slipped on the frost-slick step. The rifle clattered to the boards. Elias kicked it back toward the door, grabbed it and spun with it leveled. "Off my porch." Calder steadied himself, breathing hard. He didn't move back. His eyes flicked past Elias to the house. "You smell that?" Elias did. Not just smoke from the barn, sharper, chemical. He turned just enough to see it, a thin line of flame licking along the side of the house where someone had splashed pitch under the window. "Guess the choice just got harder," Calder said, stepping down one stair. Elias fired into the dirt by his boots. The shot cracked across the yard, sending echoes through the cottonwoods. Calder didn't flinch this time. He only smirked. 3 days was generous. He melted back into the dark, boots crunching on frosting until the sound faded entirely. Elias didn't waste a second. He bounded off the porch toward the barn, rifle slung again, bucket swinging from his other hand. The fire had climbed the post to the loft now, feeding on old hay bales stacked high. Heat rolled off in waves, making the air shimmer. Inside, the mare's eyes flashed wide in the firelight, her sides heaving. The mule kicked at his stall door, the thud echoing in Elias's bones. "Easy, boy," Elias said, cutting the lead rope with his knife. The mule bolted out the side door, almost dragging the knife from his grip. The mare followed, hooves striking sparks off the stone threshold. "Go!" Elias shouted, slapping her flank. Both animals vanished into the dark, their silhouettes swallowed by the trees. He turned back to the flames, pumping water until his shoulders screamed. Each throw of the bucket hissed and popped against the barn's walls, but the fire was faster now, climbing toward the rafters. From the yard came the sharp whistle again, Taza's signal. Elias turned, searching the shadows. "Where?" he called. "North fence." Taza's voice cut through the wind. Elias sprinted toward the sound, rifle ready. The fire behind him roared, casting his shadow long across the frost. He reached the fence in seconds, breath steaming, and found Taza crouched low beside Nita. "They cut it again," Taza said, pointing to the loose wires. Beyond them, fresh hoofprints stamped into the frozen dirt. "They'll circle back," Elias said. "Not tonight. They want you scared." "We're not scared," Nita said, chin lifted. Elias almost smiled. "Good. Then you can help me make them regret it." They worked fast, twisting wire tight with numb fingers. Elias showed Taza how to wrap the ends so they'd slice a man's hand if he tried to tear them loose again. Nita held the lantern low, shielding its glow from the open land. When they finished, Elias stepped back, scanning the dark. No movement, no sound but the barn's crackling collapse. "We sleep in shifts," he said. "You two first. I'll watch until the moon's high." Back in the house, the smell of smoke had worked into the walls. Elias checked every door, every window latch. The paper from the porch post still sat folded in his pocket, its words burned into his mind. Tomorrow night, choose, them or you. He set the rifle within reach, sat by the window, and let the cold seep through the glass into his bones. The children slept on the floor by the stove, wrapped in blankets. Taza's hand rested on the hay fork like he meant to use it. Nita had curled into herself, her breathing slow but uneven, the kind that comes from dreaming too close to fear. Outside, the moon climbed higher, painting the frost in silver. Somewhere out there, Calder and Crowder, or maybe just one man wearing both names, was waiting for the next move. Elias tightened his grip on the rifle, eyes never leaving the tree line. He'd been in the canyon once before, when the odds were bad and the stakes were worse. This felt the same. Only now he wasn't alone. A faint rustle came from the far side of the yard. Not wind, not an animal, too deliberate. Elias leaned forward, breath shallow. In the pale moonlight, a shadow shifted near the well, and then a second, smaller shadow broke away, running low toward the house. He rose without a sound, sliding the rifle's stock tight to his shoulder. Whoever was coming, they were close enough now to smell the smoke still clinging to his coat. Elias eased the door latch up with his thumb and let the cold slide in first. The smaller shadow sprinted across the yard, tripped the wire near the woodpile, and went down with a muffled yelp. "Stop there," Elias said. "Hands where I can see them." A figure pushed up to kneeling, palms raised. A woman's voice, breathless. "Don't shoot. It's Alma Ruiz." Elias lowered the rifle a fraction. Alma from the feed store. Widow 2 years. Kept a shotgun by the counter and a ledger sharper than any knife. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Bringing you a problem," she said. "And a warning." He stepped onto the porch, eyes still on the tree line. "Inside. Quick." Alma limped up the steps, favoring her left ankle. Nita had woken already. She peered around the stove, hair loose, blanket clutched under her chin. Taza stood behind her with the hay fork at his side. Alma took off her hat and looked at the children. "So it's true." "It's true," Elias said. "Speak." She set a canvas satchel on the table and pulled the flap back. Inside lay a small ledger, a folded map, and a tin of cartridges. "Crowder came to me after sundown," she said. "Offered to buy kerosene by the crate. Said it was for a cattle drive cook wagon." "Cook wagons don't run on pitch," Elias said. "Exactly," Alma replied. "I told him my supply wagon was late." He smiled like a man who already knew I was lying. Then he said I should remind you about an old debt at the mission. Said if the priest couldn't vouch for your arrangements, folks might stop selling you feed. Elias glanced at the children. Alma saw it and dropped her voice. "He meant them." Taza's jaw set. "He doesn't get to decide." Alma nodded once, like she was ticking a box in her head. "Then plan like he won't stop." Elias pointed at the ledger. "What's that?" "My book," she said. "Look." She flipped pages, names, dates, little X marks in the margin. Men with no reason to be friendly paid off their tabs tonight, all at once. Same man settled for them. Signature is different every time, but the coin was the same. Bright new eagles, not ranch money. "Railroad?" Elias asked. "Or a sheriff's pocket that got too heavy," Alma said. Either way, they'll move like they've already been paid. Taza leaned over the map. Alma tapped a finger on the creek line. They'll come from the north windbreak, same as last time, but if they get bold, they'll try your well first. Poison it or block it. Forces you out. Nita's eyes widened. Can they do that? They can if no one stops them, Alma said, but we can make it expensive. Elias poured her a cup of water. Your ankle. Twisted it on that cursed wire, she said, wincing. I'll live. He set the rifle on the table, butt toward Taza. Check the chamber. Taza cracked it open, counted, and nodded. Full. Alma studied Taza, then Nita. You too fast. Nita glanced at Taza. He is. I keep up. Good answer, Alma said. Here's the plan. We make them think the barn fire took your fight. They'll rush the house. You let them step two, then you hit them where their pride leaves them thin. Elias folded his arms. And step two is? Let the front window go, Alma said. They'll come through it to be clever. You and the boy take the side yard and the fence gap. I'll be at the well with the shotgun. She covers the cellar hatch with that whistle of hers ready. Nita blinked. Me? Whistle if they go low, Alma said. They love clever. Clever gets them careless. Taza looked at Elias. We can do it. Elias weighed the room. Barn gone. House smoking. Children dead tired. A widow limping and offering war. But the map made sense. The ledger made sense. The men outside made cruel sense too. Fine, he said. We make it expensive. They moved quickly. Alma rolled the map and tucked it in her coat. Elias wedged the front window with a loose nail so the latch would give under a hard shove. Taza fetched 2 buckets and filled them at the pump before the well could become a target. Nita tested the cellar hatch and the route to the cottonwoods twice, counting steps under her breath. Remember, Alma said, noise is bait, light is bait. You put it where you want their eyes. Nita nodded. And ears on boots. Good girl, Alma said. Elias doused the main lamp and left a single candle by the window like a nightlight in a sick room. He scattered a fresh trace of flour inside the threshold and reset the ankle-high wire near the porch. Taza propped the back door with a broom handle that would fall with a crack if touched. Positions, Elias whispered. They split. Elias and Taza slid out the side and down along the fence, moving as one shadow. Alma ghosted toward the well, shotgun low, hat brim cutting the moon. Nita crouched by the cellar hatch with the whistle between her teeth, breath fogging softly. For a minute nothing moved. Frost crept brighter on the grass. The burned barn spit a last angry beam and then dropped inward with a sigh. Boot leather creaked near the windbreak. 1 man, then 2, then the shape of a third, lower than the others, testing the ground with a stick. Alma lifted a hand without looking back. Wait. The front window rattled once, twice. A shoulder hit it, and the latch failed with a brittle snap. Glass fell inward. The candle flickered. A shape climbed through, careful and slow, boots touching down on flour that marked him like a print in snow. Another shape followed, quicker. The third hung back, listening. Elias tapped Taza's wrist. Now, they rose from the fence line. Elias stepped into the open and fired into the porch rail, splinters kicking high. The man inside flinched and reached for the door. Alma dropped the shotgun to her hip and put a round into the pump platform. Wood shattering loud as a shout. Out! A voice barked from inside. Out the back! The broom handle fell with a crack, exactly as planned. Nita's whistle sliced the air. Elias shifted 2 steps left, forcing the man at the back to choose between the wire and the open. He chose wrong. His boot caught, and he went down hard with a curse that turned into a gasp. Taza was on him in 2 strides. Not reckless, controlled. Hayfork low, point pressed to the man's forearm, just hard enough to pin without puncture. Stay down, he said. Another man lunged through the broken window, arm shielded by his coat. Elias put a round into the threshold at his feet. The man threw himself back, cursed again, and vanished inside. Enough, Calder's voice called from the dark, calm, mocking. You run a neat house, Ward. But you're bleeding time, Elias answered without raising his voice. You've already lost time. Maybe, Calder said, but I brought a clock. From the north road came the rattle of wheels, iron on stone, slow and heavy. A wagon rolled into view with canvas over the top and 2 men on the seat, kerosene crates stacked in back. Not fuel for tonight, pressure for tomorrow. They could soak every wall on the place before dawn. Alma's jaw tightened. "They mean to smoke you out." Elias sighted along the rifle at the wagon's front wheel. He didn't shoot, not yet. "Taza, if I say shadow, you take your sister and run the creek to Alma's cellar. She knows where." "Where?" Taza asked. "My place," Alma said, eyes still on the wagon. "Root cellar behind the feed store. Stone door. Looks like earth. Smells like onions. It'll hold." Nita swallowed. "And you?" "I'm not hollow like a gourd," Alma said. "I'll be fine." The wagon stopped just short of the yard. One of the men on the seat stood and lifted a lantern high. The flame lit his face. Not Crowder, not Calder. A deputy from San Miguel with a tin star he hadn't earned. "Evening," he called. "By order of the county, we're here to remove 2 wards and return stolen property." Alma laughed once, humorless. "They wrote that on a card for him." Elias called back. "You got a judge's mark." The deputy squinted as if he could scare authority into the document by looking hard. "I got a star and a wagon. That's enough." Elias felt something cold settle in him. Law used right was a fence. Law bent wrong was a whip. He lowered the rifle a hair and spoke for the children alone. "You don't run unless I say it." Taza didn't blink. "Understood." Calder's silhouette shifted near the windbreak. "Last offer," he said. "The boy now—" "The girl on the wagon. You keep the house standing." Elias lifted the rifle again. "You keep asking the wrong man." For a beat, the yard held its breath. The deputy raised his hand. The men at the wagon reached for the first crate. Wood scraped canvas. Oil sloshed. Nita's whistle trembled in her fingers. Alma leveled the shotgun and set her feet by the well. Taza pressed the hayfork harder on the pinned man's wrist until the message was clear. The crate rose. The lantern swung. The wind chose that exact second to change, bringing the smoke of the dead barn straight across the yard and through the broken window. It carried a spark with it, a small one, a mean one. It floated, lazy as a bee, and kissed the curtain's edge. The fabric caught with a soft woof that made every head turn. In the breath before anyone moved, a 4th figure stepped from the shadow of the porch post and put a revolver against Elias's ribs. "Don't," the voice whispered, "or you'll never hear the truth about that canyon." The barrel pressed into Elias's ribs was cold enough to cut through the heat from the burning curtain. He didn't look down at it. "You planning to pull that trigger, or just enjoy the view?" The man stepped closer into the glow, enough for Elias to see a weathered face under a slouched hat, eyes a pale, flat gray. "Name's Fallon," he said. "And I've got a debt to settle, for you and for them." Elias didn't flinch. "The children." Fallon's gaze flicked to the yard where Calder still lingered by the windbreak. "They're the reason Crowder's here at all, and the reason I'm here." Behind Elias, the curtain flared higher. The smell of singed wool mixed with kerosene fumes. Alma's voice cut through the air. "Elias, either you move or I drop this man by the well." Fallon pressed the revolver harder. "You take one more step toward them, and you'll never know why that boy called you father." Elias felt the grip of the rifle in his other hand, weighed the shot he could take at this range, but Fallon was too close and too steady. He chose words instead. "Talk." "Not here," Fallon said, "and not while half the county's dogs are sniffing your yard." Calder's voice carried from the dark. "Fallon, you done yet?" Fallon didn't answer him. He tilted his head toward the barn's skeleton. "You want the truth? You come with me now. Leave the kids with her." He jerked his chin toward Alma. Elias's eyes cut to Alma, steady, shotgun ready, eyes sharp under her brim. She gave the smallest shake of her head. "No trust, not with this one." The burning curtain gave way with a ripping sound, collapsing into the window frame. Sparks sprayed into the room. Nita gasped. Elias made his move. He twisted his body hard, knocking the revolver aside with his elbow, and slammed the rifle stock into Fallon's forearm. The gun went off, the shot deafening in the tight air. but it punched harmlessly into the porch post. Fallon staggered back. Elias drove a boot into his chest, sending him off the porch and into the frost. The man rolled once and came up on a knee, but the revolver skittered out of reach into the shadows. Alma's shotgun roared. The ground at Fallon's feet erupted in a spray of dirt and splinters. "Next one's not a warning," she said. Calder laughed low from the windbreak. "You all keep making this interesting." The deputy by the wagon shouted, "Crates!" The two men heaved one up, sloshing oil toward the porch. Elias swung the rifle and fired at the wagon's lantern. The glass shattered, plunging that corner of the yard into darkness. One of the men cursed. Oil dripped harmlessly into the dirt instead of catching flame. "Taza!" Elias barked. The boy was already moving, dragging Nita toward the cellar hatch. Alma backed toward them, keeping the well between herself and the deputy's line of sight. Fallon scrambled for his revolver, but froze when Elias's rifle found his chest. "Don't!" Elias said, voice like stone. "Not unless you're ready to finish it here." A shout went up from the north fence. Another group of riders cresting the rise, their silhouettes etched in moonlight. 6, maybe 7. More than Elias could pin down from the porch. Calder's voice rose above the noise. "You've got more enemies than you can count, Ward. One word from me, and this ends without a bullet in the children. Think about it." Elias didn't blink. "I already have." He jerked the rifle toward the dark beyond Fallon. "Go, tell Crowder he'll have to come himself." Fallon hesitated, then stepped back, hands loose at his sides. "When he does," he said, "you'll wish you'd listened to me." He melted into the shadows, gone as quickly as he'd appeared. The riders from the north slowed at the fence, taking in the scene, the burned barn, the armed porch, the scattered men in the yard. One of them leaned forward in his saddle and called out, "We're looking for Crowder." Calder answered with a sharp whistle. The group turned their horses and melted back over the ridge. No fight, no explanation. Elias's gut told him they weren't gone for good. The deputy spat in the dirt. "This ain't over." He signaled the men on the wagon. They backed it down the road, the crate of kerosene rocking in the bed. Silence dropped heavy after the wheels faded. Only the pop and crack of the smoldering barn filled the air. Elias lowered the rifle, feeling the weight of the night press into his shoulders. He turned to Alma. "You hurt?" She shook her head. "Ankle's worse. Pride's fine." Nita peeked from the cellar hatch, eyes wide. "Are they gone?" "For now," Elias said, "but they'll be back." Taza climbed out behind her, still gripping the hayfork. "Then we don't wait for them." Elias met his gaze. The boy wasn't wrong. "No, we don't." Alma stepped closer. "You said Santa Fe. You really think the priest there will sign papers in the middle of this mess?" "He will if I bring proof they were targeted," Elias said. "And if not," he looked at the children, "then I'll find someone who will." He glanced toward the north ridge where the riders had disappeared. The moon was higher now, casting long shadows across the frozen ground. Somewhere out there, Fallon still walked, carrying his half-finished warning. And somewhere beyond him, Crowder was deciding when to make his next move. Elias knew one thing. When that move came, the fight would not be on this porch. "We ride at first light," he said. "Before they decide to come in numbers." Alma raised a brow. "Where?" "Santa Fe," Elias said. "By the long road, through the canyon." Taza's eyes sharpened at the word. "The canyon from before?" Elias nodded once. "The same." The boy's hand tightened on the hayfork. "Then maybe we'll find out why he called you father." Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying with it the faint smell of pine from the mountains ahead, and under it, barely there, the distant echo of a whistle, sharp, rising, like the one Elias had taught them. Only this time, it wasn't his. Elias froze at the sound. The whistle was too perfect to be an accident. 3 notes rising, exactly as he'd taught Taza hours earlier. But Taza was standing right there beside him. Alma's shotgun came up fast. "That's not yours," she said under her breath. Elias moved to the edge of the porch, scanning the dark. The whistle came again, closer now, from the direction of the north fence. Taza's jaw clenched. "They're mocking us. Or trying to pull us out," Elias said. "And it's working on someone who doesn't know better." He glanced toward the cottonwoods. Nothing moved, but the sound had weight, like it came from just beyond the tree line, drawing you in by instinct. Alma stepped closer, eyes never leaving the dark. They could have taken it from one of ours. Nita's voice was small. Ours. Someone on our side, Alma said without lowering the barrel. Or someone we thought was... Elias's mind went to Fallon, the revolver in his ribs. The half-spoken promise about the canyon. If he'd slipped far enough ahead in the dark, he could be at that fence now, using the whistle as bait. The children stayed behind the stove as Elias climbed down from the porch. His boots bit into the frost. Every step toward the fence stretched the space behind him wider, more dangerous. Halfway there, the whistle stopped. Silence pressed in like a hand over the mouth. Elias halted, scanning the shadows. "Fallon," he called, "if that's you, step out." No answer, only the faint creak of wood as the wind nudged the north gate. Alma's voice carried low from the porch. "Elias, pull back." He took another step forward. "Not yet." From the corner of his eye, movement, quick, low, not from the fence but from the left, near the collapsed barn. A figure broke from shadow and bolted toward the open yard. Elias swung the rifle up, but the moon caught the runner's face. Not Fallon, not Calder. A boy, maybe 15, haircut ragged, boots too big. The kid saw Elias and skidded to a stop, hands up. "Don't shoot, I was sent..." A sharp crack cut his words off. The boy jerked once and dropped to his knees, a dark stain blooming across his shoulder. "Down!" Elias shouted. He sprinted forward, grabbed the boy under the arms and dragged him toward the cover of the porch. A bullet smacked into the dirt where they'd been, throwing up frost and soil. Alma fired toward the barn's remains, the boom rattling the porch boards. "Two by the east wall," she called. Elias hauled the boy inside. Nita was already clearing a space near the stove. Taza fetched the small tin of cloth strips and carbolic from the shelf. "Hold him," Elias said, pressing a folded rag to the wound. The boy's breath came fast and shallow. "Who sent you?" "Man, grey eyes," the boy whispered, "said to bring you this." His trembling hand pushed a crumpled scrap of paper toward Elias. Blood dotted the fold. Elias took it, opened it with his thumb. 4 words in a rough, hard hand. Canyon. First light. Alone. Fallon. Taza looked up from the boy's side. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Or too quick for a fight to be over, Elias too clean. Said. Alma reloaded slow, eyes on the yard. "They pulled back on purpose. Because they got what they came for," Elias said. Nita frowned. "They came for him." Elias shook his head. "No, for the message." The boy tried to sit up. Elias pressed him back down. "You stay still. You move. You bleed faster." The kid's eyes darted between them. "He said, you'd know what it meant." Elias glanced at Alma. "Keep them inside. Don't open for anyone without my voice." "Where are you going?" she asked. "To decide if this ends tonight or in that canyon." Taza rose, hay fork in hand. "I'm coming." "You're not," Elias said. "If I'm wrong about Fallon, I won't have you there." "I'm not scared," Taza said. "I am," Elias replied, and for the first time the boy hesitated. The wind rattled the loose porch lantern against the wall. Elias could feel the night thinning toward morning, the hours left shrinking fast. Fallon's message was clear enough. The only question was whether walking into that canyon meant ending the hunt, or never walking back out. And somewhere out in the dark, Calder was still waiting to see which choice Elias would make. The boy's breathing steadied under the rag Nita held to his wound, but his eyes stayed glassy, fixed on some point above the ceiling. Elias knew the look. It was half shock, half the weight of carrying someone else's message. Alma knelt beside him, checking the cloth. "He'll live if the bleeding stays slow." Elias nodded. "Keep him warm." He turned to Taza. "Upstairs, look from the loft window toward the canyon road. If you see lanterns, you tell me first. Not her, not Nita." Taza hesitated. "Why me?" "Because you'll watch for the way they ride. Not just the light," Elias said. "And you won't waste time asking if it's trouble." Taza didn't argue. He climbed the narrow stairs 2 at a time. Nita wrung out a strip of cloth in a basin, her small hands red from the cold water. Why would someone send a boy to tell you alone? Why not just come? Elias looked at her. Because some men like you owing them, and some like you wondering. The wind hissed against the windows, carrying with it the faint creak of the north gate. Alma's eyes snapped to the sound. We still have watchers. Elias pulled on his coat, slinging the rifle over his shoulder. Then I'm giving them something to watch. Alma straightened. You're not going to that canyon tonight. No, Elias said. But I want them thinking I might. He stepped out into the yard. Frost crunched under his boots. He didn't head toward the barn's black skeleton or the north fence, but south, into the open where the moonlight painted him plain against the ground. At the ridge, he stopped and stood a long moment, letting his silhouette hold in the glow. Somewhere beyond the windbreak, a rider shifted. Elias didn't look that way. He only adjusted the rifle strap and started back, slow, as if nothing out there was worth hurrying for. When he reached the porch, Alma was still at the door, shotgun low. You just told them you know they're there. Good, Elias said. Now they have to decide whether to wait for dawn or waste the dark. Upstairs, Taza's voice called down. 2 horses just pulled off the canyon road. No lanterns, headed west. Alma frowned. Not toward town. Toward the old Spanish well, Elias said. There's cover there. Enough to sit and watch without freezing. The boy on the floor stirred. That's where he said to meet if you wanted to live. Elias crouched beside him. Fallon. The kid nodded weakly. He said you'd see him from the bluff. Elias's mind ran the map. From the bluff above the Spanish well, you could see the first mile of Canyon Road and anyone coming in from the west. If Fallon was there, he was either trying to keep Elias alive or make him an easy mark. Alma saw the calculation in his face. You're going to look at first light, Elias said, and alone. No, Taza's voice came from the loft stairs. Not alone. You're staying, Elias said again. Taza shook his head. If it's about us, I should hear it. Whatever happened in that canyon, I'm part of it now. Elias studied him. The boy's jaw was set in the same stubborn line Elias had seen when he'd lifted him onto the horse that first day. Nita watched both of them, her fingers still pressed to the wounded boy's shoulder. Fine, Elias said at last, but you stay behind me, and you don't speak until I say. Alma stepped in front of the door. Then you take this. She held out a short double-barrel pistol, small enough to hide, loud enough to matter. Elias accepted it without argument, tucking it inside his coat. The rest of the night stretched slow. The watchers didn't move. The fire in the house settled into a low, steady burn. Somewhere around the second hour before dawn, the boy on the floor slept for real, his breathing deeper. When the first gray light slid over the horizon, Elias was already at the tack room saddling the mare. Taza led the mule out quietly, cinching the girth with quick, practiced pulls. Nita stood in the doorway, blanket over her shoulders. You'll come back? Elias looked at her. I've left the kettle ready for coffee, don't waste it. Alma touched 2 fingers to the brim of her hat. If you're not back by sundown, I start looking, and I won't be polite about it. They rode out through the south gate, keeping the cottonwoods between them and the north fence. The frost gave way to dirt as the sun climbed, lighting the ridges in pale gold. Half an hour later, they saw it, the Spanish well, a ring of crumbling stone half hidden by mesquite. And on the bluff above, a lone figure, Fallon. He didn't wave. He didn't move, just stood, watching. Elias slowed the mare, scanning for movement around the bluff. Nothing. No horses tied nearby, no glint of rifles. Stay here, Elias said to Taza. If he runs, you follow him. If he shoots, you go back to Alma. Taza's mouth tightened, but he nodded. Elias rode up the slope, the mare's hooves
Fallon
kicking
stayed
loose
still
rock.
until Elias reined in 10 paces away. You came, Fallon said. I didn't come to be talked into giving them over, Elias replied. Fallon's gray eyes met his. Good, because this isn't about them leaving. It's about them staying alive. You've got 1 minute, Elias said. Fallon looked past him toward the horizon. The man you call Crowder, he's not after them for money. He's after them because of who you were in that canyon. And what you left behind? Elias's grip on the reins tightened. I left food and a coat. Fallon shook his head. And a witness, a man who saw you take down 2 soldiers before they could touch their mother. That man was Crowder's brother. The wind lifted, carrying the smell of mesquite smoke from somewhere far down the canyon. Elias didn't take his eyes off Fallon. Why tell me now? Because he won't stop, Fallon said. Not for paper, not for law. He'll burn you out until the kids have nowhere left. And when that happens, he'll take them not to sell but to break because they're yours now. Elias didn't answer. The truth was in the way Fallon's jaw worked, in the flicker of something like regret in his eyes. You can keep fighting him here, Fallon said, or you can take them east, out of his reach, but you can't do both. Elias looked back toward the rise where Taza waited, still and watchful. The boy was too far to hear, but Elias could feel the weight of his stare. Down in the mesquite, a shadow moved, quick and low, the sun flashing off metal. Not Fallon, not Crowder. Someone else was already here, and they weren't alone. Elias saw the glint again, low to the ground, moving in short bursts. Not a scout, a marksman working his way into position. Fallon, Elias said without looking away from the mesquite. You bring friends? Fallon's voice was flat. If I had ought you'd already be bleeding. Then who's in the brush? Elias asked. Fallon turned his head just enough to see the movement, and his hand dropped to the revolver on his hip. That's not mine. The figure in the mesquite froze, realizing they'd been spotted, then bolted left toward a cluster of rocks. Elias swung the mare sideways, putting her between him and the shooter. A crack split the air. The bullet slapped dust off the bluff, not 3 feet from Fallon. Taza's voice rang out from the ridge. 2 more, coming up from the creek bed. Elias didn't wait. He spurred the mare toward the rocks, cutting off the shooter's escape route. Fallon dropped into a crouch and fired twice, each shot sharp against the canyon's echo. The first man in the mesquite went down with a shout, clutching his leg. The 2 from the creek split, one heading for the well, the other angling wide to flank. Elias raised the rifle, sighted the flanker, and fired. The man spun and hit the dirt hard, rolling until he stopped against a stump. Fallon was already moving, crossing open ground toward the wounded shooter to kick the rifle away. "This one's breathing," he called. Elias pulled the mare around to check the well. The last man had reached it and was fumbling with something at the base, metal glinting in his hands. Elias shouted, "Leave it!" and fired into the stone ring inches from the man's wrist. The man dropped the object, a small iron canister, and dove behind the well. Fallon strode over, revolver raised, and put a boot into the man's ribs. The canister rolled into the open, leaking a thin stream of black liquid. "Kerosene," Fallon said, grimacing. "They were going to foul the water before you got here." Taza reached them on the mule, breathless. "The one you hit at the stump, he's gone. Took off north. Then he'll run to Crowder," Elias said. Fallon holstered his revolver but kept scanning the horizon. "You don't have long before he brings more." Elias looked at the man writhing near the well. "Name?" The man spat into the dirt. "Who's asking?" "I'm the one who'll decide whether you walk away or crawl," Elias said. The man hesitated, then muttered, "Riggs." "Riggs," Elias repeated, as if fixing it in his mind. "You ride for Crowder." "I ride for whoever pays," Riggs said. Fallon crouched beside him, voice low. "And right now you're being paid in borrowed time." Riggs's eyes darted between them. "Crowder's in the canyon. He's waiting for you." Elias's jaw tightened. "How many?" Riggs shook his head. "More than you want to see." Fallon stood, looking at Elias. "You believe him. Enough to change the route," Elias said. "We're not riding straight into him." Taza frowned. "Then where?" "Back to the ranch," Elias said. "We pack light, take Alma, and we move before they can set a ring around us." Fallon stepped closer. "You try to outpace him, he'll send men ahead. You need a choke point you can hold." Elias thought of the old arroyo south of the ranch, narrow walls, only 2 ways through. "I know a place." They bound Riggs' hands and left him sitting by the well. "Someone will find you," Elias said. "Whether they like what they find depends on how long you keep your mouth shut." The ride back was quick and tense. Every open stretch felt like a place for a rifle barrel to glint. Fallon rode ahead, scanning ridges,
while Taza kept glancing back at the horizon. By the time the ranch came into view, Alma was already outside with the shotgun, scanning the south pasture. When she saw them, she didn't wave, just turned and went inside, knowing the look on Elias's face meant no time for talk. Inside, Nita had the wounded boy sitting up, sipping water. His eyes widened at Fallon. "That him?" Elias didn't answer. He started pulling down sacks from the pantry. "We've got maybe an hour before Crowder's men try to box us in. We're heading south." Alma set the shotgun on the table. "Through the arroyo." Elias nodded. "Narrow, high walls. If they follow, they have to do it in single file." Fallon added, "And if they do, they're easier to stop." Nita looked from Elias to Taza. "What if they're already there?" "Then we make them wish they weren't," Elias said. They worked fast, bedrolls tied, food split into 2 sacks, water skins filled. Alma slipped extra shells into her coat pocket. Fallon took the lead rope for the mule, his eyes always on the window. When they stepped outside, the wind had shifted again, bringing the smell of pine and something sharper, wood smoke that didn't belong to the ranch. Taza pointed to the ridge north of the barn's remains. A thin column of smoke curled into the pale sky. "They're close," he said. Elias swung into the saddle. "Then we move now." They rode hard, cutting south through the cottonwoods, the frost crunching under the hooves. Behind them, faint but growing, came the sound of more riders, many more than the 3 they'd faced at the well. By the time they reached the mouth of the arroyo, the sun was climbing, throwing long shadows down the narrow cut of rock. Elias reined in, listening. The wind funneled through the stone walls, carrying every sound sharp and clear. Far back on the trail, the echo of hooves grew louder. Fallon looked at Elias. "You take them through. I'll stay at the mouth." Elias shook his head. "We hold them together. 2 rifles, 2 angles." Taza guided Nita toward the mule. "We can help." "No," Elias said. "You keep moving. If we're not behind you in 10 minutes, you ride to the mission in Las Trampas. Tell them we're coming." Nita's eyes searched his face. "You'll come." Elias gave the smallest nod. "Go!" The children and Alma disappeared down the arroyo's bend, their shapes swallowed by shadow. Fallon checked his revolver, Elias his rifle. The hoofbeats were closer now, the sound rolling between the rock walls like thunder. Elias braced himself in the narrowest gap, the rifle steady against his shoulder. "We stop them here," he said. Fallon glanced at him, a flicker of something like respect in his grey eyes. "Then let's make it count." Around the bend, the first rider appeared, Crowder himself, his smile sharp as the steel on his spurs, and behind him, the line of men stretched back into the sunlight. Crowder didn't rush. He reined in just inside rifle range, letting his men fan out behind him in a narrow stagger down the arroyo trail. The walls forced them single file, exactly as Elias had hoped. The man's smile didn't falter. "You could have saved yourself the trouble, Ward. Hand them over, we ride away, and you get to keep breathing ranch air." Elias braced the rifle to his shoulder. "You came all this way to talk?" Crowder's gaze flicked to Fallon. "I see you found a guide." Fallon's revolver hung easy at his side. "Guide's not the same as friend," Crowder chuckled. "Still talking like a man who hasn't picked a side." "I have," Fallon said. "It's just not yours." The first of Crowder's men shifted in the saddle, glancing at the walls that boxed them in. Crowder noticed and let his smile thin. "You think this little rock chute will save you, Ward? It's a grave with a prettier view." Elias kept his voice level. "Graves are for men who stand still. You've been doing that your whole life." Crowder's eyes hardened. "Enough." He raised his hand. Elias fired before it could drop. The shot hit the lead rider behind Crowder, knocking him sideways out of the saddle. The man's boot caught in the stirrup, dragging him into the horse behind, tangling the line. "Now!" Elias barked. Fallon fired into the rock face just above the riders. Chips exploded down like hail, spooking horses. A second rider yanked at his reins and slammed into the man behind him. Crowder wheeled his horse sideways to keep the line from collapsing. "Push through!" he shouted. Elias chambered another round and dropped the third rider in line, this one with a clean shot to the shoulder. The narrow space meant the rest had to climb over or turn back, and neither was fast. Fallon moved to the opposite side of the gap.
keeping the angle so no rider could see both of them at once. He shot low, forcing horses to rear and block the way. Crowder's voice cut through the chaos. "Get me Ward!" Two men dismounted, drawing revolvers as they ducked between their panicked horses. Elias sighted and fired. One dropped, the other dove back for cover. A bullet smacked into the rock inches from Fallon's head. He didn't flinch, just shifted position and sent a round snapping into the shooter's thigh. "You're burning daylight, Crowder!" Elias called. "And losing men you can't replace!" Crowder's jaw worked. He raised his hand again, this time in a slow, deliberate wave. The gunfire eased, his men pulling their mounts into a tight knot. "You think you've won something?" Crowder said. "You're one bend from open ground, and I've got more waiting there. You leave this arroyo, you ride into my noose." Elias kept the rifle up. "Maybe. Or maybe you follow me out and find it's your noose." Crowder's gaze shifted past Elias, down the arroyo toward where Alma and the children had gone. "Or maybe I take the shortcut through the ridge pass and meet them before you do." Fallon's voice was ice. "You lay a hand on them, you won't have enough men left to bury you." Crowder studied him. "You always were sentimental about the wrong people." He tugged the reins, turning his horse with a sharp jerk. "We'll meet again, Ward, and next time I'll be the one picking the ground." The line began to retreat, backing their mounts down the arroyo, careful to keep Crowder in the lead. The sound of hooves faded until only the wind through the stone remained. Elias lowered the rifle but didn't relax. "He's not bluffing about the ridge pass." Fallon holstered his revolver. "Then we don't give him time to get there." They ran to their horses, mounting fast. The mare surged forward, Fallon close behind on his bay. The arroyo's twists threw shadows across the trail, slowing them only where the turns narrowed too tight to pass at speed. By the time they cleared the last bend, they could see the ridge pass ahead, a low cut through the hills, sunlight glinting on the stone, and in the distance, a thin plume of dust rising. "He's sending the other half there," Elias said. Fallon glanced at the sky. "We might beat them if we cut across the dry basin." "It's rough ground," Elias warned. "Better rough than dead," Fallon replied. They veered off the trail, plunging into the basin where cracked earth split into deep crevices. The horses picked their way with quick, careful steps, the sound of hooves echoing strangely in the stillness. Halfway across, Taza's whistle cut through the air, sharp, urgent. Elias's head snapped toward the far side of the basin. On a low rise, Taza waved them in, Alma and Nita beside him. Behind them, the mule shifted nervously. When Elias reached them, Alma's face was set hard. "You've got less than 5 minutes. I saw riders on the ridge already." Elias scanned the pass. Dust clouds were spilling down its far side, Crowder's second group moving fast. "We hold them here," Elias said. Fallon shook his head. "Too open. We'll get flanked." Elias looked at the rise behind Alma. A line of old stone fence still stood there, half buried in scrub. "Not if we make them come straight in." They moved quick, Alma and Nita pulling the mule behind the fence, Taza laying out extra cartridges along the low wall. Fallon picked his spot at the far end, Elias at the center. The first riders crested the rise, sunlight flashing off their barrels. Elias raised the rifle, breath steady. "Wait," he murmured. The riders fanned just enough to clear each other, spurring down the slope. Dust billowed, swallowing their legs. "Now!" Elias said. The first volley cracked across the basin, kicking dirt and stone into the air. One horse stumbled, its rider rolling free. Another man veered off, only to have Fallon's shot drive him back toward the center. Taza worked the spare rounds along to Elias without looking up, his hands moving fast. Alma's shotgun roared once, the sound rolling over the slope like thunder. The riders slowed, confusion breaking their momentum. Crowder's second group wasn't as tight as the first. They hadn't seen the arroyo fight, didn't know what they were riding into. Elias took a breath, sighted the man in the lead, and squeezed. The shot dropped him clean from the saddle. The rest pulled up hard, horses wheeling, the whole line faltering. Fallon's voice cut through the smoke. "They're breaking." Elias chambered another round. "Not enough, they'll regroup." Beyond the dust, movement caught his eye, a single rider holding back, watching, not engaging, too still to be just another man. Elias felt the recognition before he could name it.
Even at this distance, he knew the set of those shoulders, Crowder. He was letting the others test the ground while he measured the defense. And that meant he had no intention of leaving until he saw where the weak point was. Elias lowered the rifle just enough to speak without being heard beyond the wall. "He's going to find a way through. We need to move before he does." Fallon kept his eyes on the slope. "Then tell me where—" Elias looked south, toward the jagged rim of the basin. "Through there. It'll be hell on the horses, but it'll take us clear." Alma's voice was tight. "And if they follow?" Elias's gaze went back to Crowder. "Then we make sure they regret it." Elias didn't wait for agreement. He swung over the wall, motioning for Alma and the children to mount up. "South rim, now. Stay tight." Fallon covered them, firing 2 quick shots to keep the riders at bay. "Me go. I'll close the line." They pushed into the jagged rim, the ground a mess of loose rock and sharp drop-offs. The mule stumbled once, but Alma steadied him, murmuring low in Spanish. Nita clung to the saddle horn, eyes fixed on Elias's back. Behind them, Crowder's men regrouped. Shouts echoed across the basin. Elias glanced back once and saw them fanning wide, looking for a path through the rim. Fallon urged his bay up beside Elias. "They'll find the cut on the west side. 2, maybe 3 minutes. Then we make it over the saddle before they get eyes on us," Elias said. They climbed hard, the horses scrambling over loose shale. The rim's edge came into view. Beyond it, the land fell into a narrow draw lined with cottonwoods. If they could get down into it, they'd have cover for miles. "Almost there," Elias called. A shot cracked from somewhere high on their left. A puff of dust leapt from the rock beside Alma's knee. "Sniper!" Fallon shouted. Elias kicked the mare forward, cutting between Alma and the ridge. He scanned for the shooter, a flicker of movement behind a jag of stone. Just enough to catch the sun. He fired, the shot ringing off rock. The figure ducked back. "Keep moving," Elias barked. They crested the saddle and dropped into the draw, the world narrowing to the sound of hooves and the pounding in Elias's ears. The cottonwoods closed around them, branches whipping past. For a moment, the noise from behind faded. Then the thunder of pursuit returned. Crowder's men had found the cut. "They're in," Taza called from the rear. "Ride," Elias urged. "Don't look back." The draw twisted, forcing them single file. At a sharp bend, Elias pulled up. "We make a stand here. Alma, you take the children down to that bend with the big cottonwood. Stay low. Keep the mule between you and the trail." "I'm not leaving you two," Alma said. "You're keeping them breathing," Elias replied. Reluctantly, she wheeled the mule away, Nita glancing over her shoulder until the turn hid them from view. Fallon checked his revolver. 2 cylinders left. Elias nodded. "Make them count." The first rider appeared, leaning low in the saddle. Elias fired. Horse and man went down in a tangle. The second tried to leap the wreck and caught a shot from Fallon that took him out of the saddle. More came, pushing hard despite the narrow space. Dust and smoke choked the air. Elias worked the lever, each shot deliberate. Fallon shifted position to cover the opposite angle, forcing the riders to slow. Through the haze, a figure emerged, Crowder, again holding back, again letting his men take the worst of it. He was shouting orders, pointing past Elias toward the bend where Alma had gone. "He's sending 2 around," Fallon warned. Elias's gut clenched. "I'll cut them off. Hold here." He spurred the mare into a side path barely wide enough for her shoulders, branches clawing at his coat. The path curved hard and dropped back toward the main draw just ahead of the bend. He burst out in time to see 2 riders closing on Alma's position. She was crouched by the cottonwood, shotgun up, Nita and Taza flat to the ground behind her. Elias didn't slow. He raised the rifle one-handed and fired. The lead rider toppled sideways, his horse veering into the second. Alma stepped out and finished the second man with a blast of buckshot that echoed like thunder between the trees. "You picked a fine time to show up," she said, reloading. "Fallon's still holding the line," Elias replied. "We need to pull him before they overrun it." They rode back at a gallop, the mare's sides heaving. When they reached the stand, Fallon was crouched behind a fallen trunk, his revolver empty but a borrowed carbine smoking in his hands. 3 more of Crowder's men lay in the dust. "Time to go," Elias said. Fallon swung up without argument. They wheeled south, driving the horses down the draw as shouts from behind grew fainter. By the time they slowed, the cottonwoods had thickened into a green tunnel. Sunlight dappled the ground, and the air carried the cold, clean smell of water. Elias finally let the mare walk, his eyes scanning the shadows. "We'll camp here for a couple of hours. Let the horses breathe." Alma dismounted, stretching her back. "They won't quit." "No," Elias said, "but they'll have to find us first." Fallon stepped closer, voice low. "He's not letting go, Ward. Not while those kids are under your roof. You take them east. Maybe they get a chance. Stay here and he'll keep coming until one of you is in the ground." Elias looked at Taza, at Nita. They were filthy, tired, but still standing. The boy met his gaze with something fierce and unbroken. "East isn't safe either," Elias said. "Just different wolves." Fallon shrugged. "Then you pick the wolves you can live with." A gust of wind rattled the cottonwood leaves. Far off, too faint for the children to notice, Elias thought he heard the echo of a horse's whinny. He tightened the cinch on his saddle. "Rest's over. We keep moving." Nita groaned. "Can't we stop for just a little?" "Not yet," Elias said. "We've still got daylight, and Crowder's still breathing." Fallon's eyes narrowed. "You plan to change that?" Elias swung into the saddle. "Before this ends, one of us will." They moved out, the draw winding deeper into the hills. The trees swallowed the light, and with it came the feeling that every bend could hold either salvation or the man who'd been hunting them since the canyon. The draw tightened until the walls leaned overhead, blotting out most of the sky. Elias could feel the mare's ears flicking at every echo, some theirs, some not. The smell of water grew stronger, and with it, a metallic tang that made his gut knot. Fallon raised a hand, signaling a halt. He slid from his saddle, crouched, and touched the damp earth. "Fresh tracks," he said. "Shod horses. 4, maybe 5. They stopped here, then split." Elias scanned the shadows. "Split how?" "2 went ahead," Fallon said. "The rest looped around. Could be trying to box us in." Alma's voice was low but sharp. "If they're ahead, they've picked the ground." Elias thought fast. "There's a choke just up the trail, a fallen cottonwood across the draw. They'll use it." Taza shifted in his saddle. "Then we don't ride into it." Elias met his eyes. "No, we turn it on them." They moved in silence until the pale trunk of the fallen cottonwood came into view, spanning the draw like a barricade. 2 men crouched behind it, rifles ready, eyes on the narrow approach. They hadn't seen Elias's group yet. Elias dismounted, handing the reins to Alma. "Take the kids back 50 yards and keep them there. When you hear 2 shots close together, ride hard." Nita's eyes widened. "You're staying." "I'm ending it," Elias said. Fallon was already moving along the draw's edge, using brush for cover. Elias mirrored him on the other side. They crept in until the smell of gun oil drifted from the men at the log. Fallon caught Elias's eye, mouthed, "On 3. 1. Elias steadied his rifle. 2. The mare stamped once in the distance. 3. Both men fired. The ambushers went down hard, their rifles clattering against the log. Elias vaulted over, landing in the churned dirt, scanning for more movement. From deeper in the draw came the rapid drumming of hooves. Crowder's voice carried with it, calm, deliberate. "Ward, put down the rifle and step into the open." Elias stayed behind the log. "If you wanted me dead, you'd have taken the shot already." A chuckle echoed off the rock. "I want you to see it, Ward. The end of your fight." Fallon's gaze snapped to the bend in the trail. A lone rider appeared, Crowder, easy in the saddle, the sunlight glancing off the steel in his hand. Behind him, 2 more riders dragged a figure between them. Alma. Elias's chest tightened. Her coat was torn at the shoulder, but she was upright, eyes burning. "You let them go," Elias called. "And we finish this between us." Crowder's smile deepened. "I think we already are." He nodded to one of the men, who yanked Alma forward until she stumbled. "One more step, and she gets to watch me take the children." From the rear came Taza's voice, steady, defiant. "You won't touch them." Crowder twisted in the saddle to look. "You think you're the first boy to make that promise?" While his gaze was off, Elias raised the rifle. Fallon moved in sync, flanking to get a clean angle. Elias called out, "Crowder." The man turned back and Elias fired. The shot struck Crowder's gun hand, spinning the revolver into the dirt. In the same breath, Fallon's bullet took the rider to Crowder's left, pitching him off his horse. Alma wrenched free, driving her elbow into the second man's ribs before dropping low. Elias vaulted the log, covering the distance in a blur. Crowder swung down from his saddle with surprising speed, his other hand flashing a knife. The two men collided hard, boots sliding in the dirt. The knife slashed past Elias's coat, nicking cloth but missing flesh. Elias drove his shoulder into Crowder's chest, sending them both crashing into the base of the fallen cottonwood. They grappled, Crowder's strength raw and furious. "You think you can keep them," he snarled. "They'll never be safe with you." Elias caught his wrist, forcing the knife away inch by inch. "They're safer than they'd ever be with you breathing." Crowder twisted, trying to bring his knee up, but Elias slammed his weight forward, pinning the man's arm and driving his fist into Crowder's jaw. Once, twice. The knife slipped free and clattered away. Fallon's voice cut in sharp. "Elias, behind!" One of Crowder's men, bleeding from a shoulder wound, had crawled to his rifle and was raising it. Elias rolled, grabbed Crowder's dropped revolver, and fired. The man dropped face first into the dust. Crowder surged up in the distraction, but Fallon was there, revolver leveled at his chest. "Don't," Fallon said. For the first time, Crowder hesitated. His eyes flicked between the two men, measuring, weighing. Then he smiled. A small, cold thing. "This isn't over." Elias's voice was low. "Yes, it is." He swung the revolver butt into Crowder's temple. The man went limp, collapsing. The sudden quiet rang louder than the fight had. Only the horse's heavy breathing and the wind in the cottonwoods filled the air. Alma retrieved her shotgun from the ground, checking the chamber. "You could have ended him right there." Elias looked at the children who had crept forward, eyes wide but unflinching. Some things they don't need to see, not yet. Fallon holstered his revolver, glancing at the unconscious man. "Then we'd better move before he wakes up and proves you wrong." They bound Crowder's hands and feet, slung him over his own saddle, and started south through the draw. The sun was angling low now, throwing long shadows ahead of them. Elias rode at the front, the children close behind. The fight was done for now. But as the wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of hoofbeats from somewhere far off, he knew there were still men out there who'd come looking. And when they did, he'd be ready. They rode until the draw widened into open country, the cottonwoods giving way to rolling hills bathed in the gold of the setting sun. Elias felt the weight of the day in his bones, but the children's steady presence behind him was a reminder that stopping wasn't an option. Not yet. They found a sheltered hollow near a spring, its water cold and clear. Alma tended to the wounded boy, now resting on a bedroll with a cleaner bandage. Nita knelt beside her, fetching water and checking his breathing. Taza kept watch from a small rise, the hay fork never far from his reach. Fallon tied Crowder to a stout cottonwood at the edge of camp. The man was awake now, head lowered but eyes sharp, tracking every movement. He said nothing, but the set of his jaw made it clear he was already thinking of the next move. Elias approached, crouching so they were eye to eye. "You're going to face a judge in Santa Fe," he said. "You'll have a chance to talk there. Until then, you're just cargo." Crowder smirked faintly. "You think bars will hold me?" Elias's voice was steady. "I don't think about you after tonight." He stood, leaving Crowder to stew in silence. The fire Alma built was small, just enough to warm hands without throwing light far. They ate what they had, hardtack, strips of jerky, and coffee so bitter it pulled the weariness from their eyes. As the night deepened, Taza came to sit by Elias. "You could have killed him. Why didn't you?" Elias studied the boy's face, the sharp lines of someone who'd seen too much too young. "Because if I'd done it for me, it would have been easy. But I did it for you and your sister, and you need to know there's another way." Taza was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Another way doesn't mean softer." "No," Elias said, a small smile in his voice. It just means smarter. The wind shifted, carrying the clean scent of pine from the distant hills. Nita came to sit on Elias's other side, leaning into his arm. "Are we going to stay with you now?" she asked. Elias looked at her, then at Taza. "If you want to." She nodded without hesitation. "We do." Alma, from across the fire, gave a faint smile. "Looks like you've got yourself a family again, Ward." Elias didn't answer right away. He let the words settle in the space between them, realizing they felt more like truth than anything had in years. They set watches in pairs through the night, though no riders came. By dawn, the air was crisp and the horizon pale with the promise of a clear day. Fallon saddled up without a word, the kind of quiet that comes from a man who's already decided he'll ride another road. When Elias asked, Fallon just said, "Got places I can't stay away from for long. But if Crowder's friends come calling, you know how to find me." Elias offered his hand, and Fallon took it with a firm grip. Then he was gone, his bay's hoofbeats fading into the open land. The ride to Santa Fe took 2 days. The judge heard the case quick, given the testimony of Alma and the children, and the ledger Alma had brought from the feed store. Crowder was sent to a holding cell with a promise of trial. Whether he stayed there would be another fight for another day, but for now, the threat was gone. Back at the ranch, the air felt different. The burned barn was still a wound on the land, but the house was intact, the well clean, and the silence no longer felt like loneliness. Taza started mending the fence without being asked, and Nita claimed a small corner of the porch as hers, sitting there with a book she'd found in town. One evening, as the sun slid low and painted the land in copper light, Elias stood at the fence line, watching the horizon. Alma stepped up beside him. "You're thinking about when they'll come back?" Elias nodded. "Always. But this time," she said, "you won't be standing alone." He glanced at the house where the children's laughter drifted out through an open window and a rare peace settled in his chest. "No," he said softly, "not anymore. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in standing their ground when it matters most. Subscribe to hear more tales of courage, sacrifice, and unexpected family. And don't miss the next chapter in the lives of Elias, Taza, and Nita. You never know what tomorrow might bring or what battles are waiting just over the horizon.